The twin suns of Vera city burned above the stone walls, filling the sky with a heavy light. The alien city was old, built with towers of black iron and streets lined with silver dust. At the center of the city stood the Great Square. It was a place where the Zorath, the rulers of this world, gathered when a judgment was announced. Today, the square was filled with hundreds of alien voices, whispering and waiting for punishment to begin. At the heart of the square, a platform had been raised. Upon it stood a young beautiful woman. Her hands were tied with metal bands that pressed against her skin. She looked small under the great towers, but her presence caught every eye. She had a soft natural beauty, though her face was pale with fear. Her name was Myra, a villager from the outer lands. She had never seen the city until the day she was captured. The Zorath judge sat high upon a black chair carved from stone. His body was tall and thin, his skin grey like the surface of the moon, his eyes sharp as blades. He looked down at Myra with no hint of kindness. Around him stood guards, each holding whips made of woven steel threads. The crowd of aliens shifted, waiting for the sentence to fall. The judge spoke in a voice that carried across the square. Myra of the lowlands, you are found guilty of theft. You stole bread from the storehouse of the Zorath guard. For this crime, the punishment is 300 lashes. This is the law of Vera. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some aliens nodded, agreeing with the decision. Others whispered that no one could survive such punishment. But none raised a voice against it. The Zorath were a proud people, and their laws were cruel. To them, mercy was weakness, and strength was proven through suffering. Myra lowered her eyes. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself. She had not stolen for greed. She had taken a piece of bread for her younger brother, who lay sick in the village. His body was thin, his breath shallow. She had thought no one would notice if she took a single loaf. But the guards had caught her and dragged her to the city. Now she stood before the whole world, condemned. Her heart pounded in her chest as the words sank into her soul. 300 lashes. She knew what that meant. No one ever returned from such punishment. She would not live to see her brother again. Her knees weakened, and her body shook. The guards moved closer, preparing the post where she would be tied. Their faces were cold, their hands firm. The sound of chains filled the square as they set the place for punishment. The whip was tested in the air. It cracked with a sharp sound that echoed against the iron towers. The crowd grew silent. The moment had come. Myra lifted her face for a moment. She looked at the crowd, searching for one kind face, one voice that might rise to protect her. But the aliens stood still. Their eyes were filled with hunger for a spectacle. To them, she was not a woman. She was only a lesson, a warning of what happens when the law is broken. Her breath grew heavy. She thought of her brother. She thought of the small house in the village where the air smelled of herbs and soil. She remembered the nights when she told him stories to help him sleep. A tear slid down her cheek. She was not afraid of pain. She was afraid of leaving him alone. The judge raised his hand, and the guards pulled Myra forward. Her wrists were tied to the post. The steel bands bit into her skin. The whip was raised. The crowd leaned closer. The air grew tight with expectation. At the edge of the square, unnoticed by most, a human watched. His name was Aaron. He had come to this city only weeks before, traveling among the stars as a wanderer and seeker of knowledge. He had seen many worlds, but Vera was unlike them all. He had watched the Zorath with interest, but also with unease. Their ways were harsh. Their sense of justice was built upon fear. Now he stood among the aliens, taller than most of them, his human frame strong though marked by the scars of travel. His eyes were fixed on the platform. He saw Myra's trembling hands. He saw the fear in her eyes, and the loneliness in her heart. His chest tightened. Something inside him stirred, something that could not remain silent. The whip rose higher. The first lash was seconds away. The square held its breath. Myra closed her eyes, ready for the storm of pain to begin. Aaron clenched his fists. He could not accept this. To him, punishment for survival was no justice at all. To him, cruelty was not law but weakness disguised as strength. The fire inside him grew stronger with each heartbeat. The square of Vera City had fallen into silence. The whip was still raised, waiting to strike, when a voice cut through the heavy air. "Give them to me." The words were strong, clear, and filled with a power that surprised everyone. Heads turned, eyes widened, and even the guards froze in confusion. No one ever interrupted a punishment. No one dared to speak against the Zorith law. Yet here was a single voice, rising above fear. It was Aaron, the human. He stood at the edge of the crowd, taller than most, his frame broad, his face sharp with resolve. His clothing was worn from travel across distant worlds, but his presence commanded attention. He pushed his way forward, each step steady and unbroken. The crowd parted as if an unseen force moved them aside. Myra opened her eyes. Through her tears, she saw him stepping closer, his eyes fixed not on the guards, not on the judge, but on her. She could not understand it. She had never seen him before. Why would a stranger risk anything for her? The Zorith judge lifted his grey hand. His voice rolled across the square like stone grinding against stone. "Who speaks against the law of this city?" Aaron stopped at the foot of the platform. He looked up at the judge without fear. His voice rose again, strong enough for all to hear. "I do. If 300 lashes must fall, then give them to me. Not to her." The crowd erupted with shock. Voices whispered in disbelief. Some laughed, thinking it a strange joke. Others grew angry, for to challenge the law was to challenge the power of the Zorith. The judge leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing. "You are human, not of this world. Why do you place yourself in the path of punishment? This woman is guilty. The law is clear. Her back will bear the weight of her crime." Aaron stood tall, his hands at his sides, his chest rising with calm breaths. "She is guilty of nothing but hunger. She took bread to keep her brother alive. Is this a crime so great that it demands her death? If punishment must be given, then let it fall on me. She will not survive, but I will stand." The crowd fell into silence again. The Zorith were not a people who understood such words. Mercy was foreign to them. To suffer for another was beyond their logic. The guards glanced at one another, uncertain whether to obey the judge or to strike this strange man down. Myra's eyes widened. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. She felt a storm of emotions inside her heart. She was grateful, but also afraid. This human was stepping into fire that no one could endure. Why would he do this for her, a stranger from the lowlands? The judge studied Aaron for a long moment. His cold expression did not change, but his voice held a note of curiosity. "You speak as if pain means nothing to you. Do you think your body will stand against 300 lashes? You are human, fragile compared to the Zorith. Do you think your sacrifice will change the law?" Aaron's reply was steady. "I do not think of myself. I think of her. The law may demand punishment, but the law does not decide who bears it. I choose to take it in her place. The square trembled with whispers. Children pressed closer to their parents. Merchants leaned from their stalls. Warriors of the guard shifted uneasily. This was not how a judgment was meant to unfold. The judge raised a hand for silence. Very well. If you desire pain, you shall have it. The law demands 300 lashes. The law does not forbid another from standing in place of the guilty. We shall see how strong the flesh of a human truly is. The guards hesitated for a moment. Their cold eyes studied Aaron as if trying to measure the strength of his will. Slowly, they untied Myra from the post. Her body shook as the chains fell away. She nearly collapsed, but caught herself. Her eyes stayed locked on Aaron, her heart pounding. Two guards seized him. They pulled his arms and bound him with the same steel bands that had held her. The crowd murmured louder now, some mocking, others curious, and a few strangely silent as if respect had touched them. Aaron's hands tightened against the cold metal. He felt the bands bite into his skin, but he did not resist. His eyes stayed steady, looking forward. He was ready. Myra stepped forward, her voice breaking at last. No. Do not do this. You cannot. Aaron turned his head slightly, his voice calm though his eyes burned with fire. You must live. That is enough for me. The guards tied him firmly to the post. The whipmaster tested the steel threads again. The sound cracked across the air, louder than before. The crowd waited, their hearts caught between disbelief and anticipation. The young woman covered her mouth with her hands. Her knees weakened, but she could not look away. She saw the human standing in her place, his back straight, his spirit unbroken. The judge lifted his arm. Begin. The whip rose high above the guard's head. The crowd leaned closer. Every breath in the square seemed to stop. Myra's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped inside her throat. Aaron closed his eyes for a brief second, drawing strength from the silence within himself. When he opened them again, they burned with a light that even the Zorith could not understand. The first lash fell. The first lash struck across Aaron's back. The sound cracked through the square like thunder. The steel threads bit into his skin, leaving a mark of fire. The crowd gasped. Some smiled with cruel delight, while others grew silent, uncertain of what they were witnessing. Aaron's body jolted with the force, but he did not cry out. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but his eyes stayed steady. He stood tall against the post, as if the blow was nothing more than wind against stone. The guard raised the whip again. The second strike fell, sharper than the first. Pain shot through his body, but again he refused to give a sound. He lifted his head and fixed his gaze on the open sky above the square. The Zorith judge leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. He had seen countless punishments, but never had he seen anyone face the lash with such silence. He wanted to see how long this human could last. The crowd whispered among themselves. He does not scream. How can flesh endure this? He is only human. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others leaned closer, eager to see if his spirit would soon break. Myra stood at the edge of the platform, her heart twisting with every strike. She wanted to turn away, but she could not. Her eyes followed every movement of the whip, every mark it left across his back. Tears ran down her face, though she tried to hold them back. She whispered under her breath, begging him to stop, begging the guards to stop, but no one listened. The third lash fell. Then the fourth. Each one cracked louder in her ears than the last. But the human's voice never broke. He did not beg. He did not plead. He only stood, his back straight, his spirit unshaken. At last, Aaron spoke. His voice was low but strong, carrying across the square with a weight that silenced even the whispers. Is this your justice? To break the weak, to crush the innocent, to call pain a law? The judge's eyes narrowed further. His lips curled in disdain. Silence, human. You are here to suffer, not to speak. Aaron turned his head slightly, his eyes finding Myra. His words rose louder, stronger, echoing against the walls of the square. She does not deserve this. Her hands carried bread for her brother, not a weapon. Yet you call her guilty. If punishment must fall, then let it fall on me. But know this. I will not bow. I will not cry. Your law cannot break me. The crowd grew restless. Never before had a prisoner spoken such words in the middle of punishment. Some of the aliens muttered angrily, their pride stung by his defiance. Others looked at him with something new in their eyes, something that felt like respect. The whip fell again. A fifth strike cut across his back. His body shook, but his voice rose louder. You think strength is shown by cruelty. You think fear makes you rulers. But you are wrong. Strength is not in the lash. Strength is in standing for another. The words rolled through the square like fire through dry grass. The Zorith were a proud race, but many had never heard such defiance. They looked at one another with uneasy eyes. Could it be that the human was right? The judge's hand tightened on the arm of his stone chair. He felt anger rising in him, but also curiosity. This human was not like the others he had seen. His will was iron. His voice was fire. Could he truly endure all 300 lashes? Myra's tears blurred her vision. She whispered through trembling lips. Why? Why are you doing this? Aaron's head lifted again, his voice soft but clear enough for her to hear. Because no one should stand alone. You must live. You must carry hope. Her heart ached at his words. She had never known such courage. She had never seen such sacrifice. In that moment, the chains on her wrists felt lighter, though she was no longer bound. The whip struck again and again. Each lash echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. Aaron's back burned with pain, but his spirit grew stronger. His voice carried with each strike, not breaking, but rising. Give them to me. Everyone. I will not fall. The guards began to hesitate. Their hands trembled as they swung the whip. They had punished countless prisoners, yet none had stood like this. None had spoken words that pierced deeper than any lash. They glanced at one another, uncertain, but the judge's cold stare forced them to continue. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some began to murmur words of doubt. A few whispered in awe. They had come to watch a young woman die, but instead they were watching a human rise. By the 20th lash, Aaron's back was marked with deep lines of fire. His breath grew heavier, but still no cry left his lips. His strength was more than flesh. It was spirit, and spirit could not be broken by steel. The judge stood slowly, his long grey form towering over the square. His voice thundered across the air. You think your suffering makes you strong. You think your voice carries power. But pain will silence you, human. 300 lashes will crush your will as it crushes all others. Aaron lifted his head, sweat on his brow, fire in his eyes. His voice rose again, defiant and unbroken. No. Pain does not silence me. Pain only proves that I stand. She will not fall. I will not fall. Your cruelty is weak, and humanity is stronger than your law. A hush swept across the crowd. Even the vines above the towers seemed to grow still. Every alien eye was fixed on him. The whip hung in the guard's hand, frozen for a moment. For the first time in the memory of Vera, a prisoner had turned punishment into a weapon of truth. The square of Vera City trembled with tension. The human had spoken words that no one had ever dared to speak under the lash. His voice had broken through the silence of fear. His defiance carried across the iron towers and into the hearts of all who listened. The guards hesitated. Their hands still held the whip, but their movements had slowed. Never before had they seen a prisoner stand so strong. Never before had one taken the punishment of another. They glanced at the judge, waiting for his command. The Zorath judge rose from his black stone chair. His tall figure loomed over the square. His grey skin shimmered under the light of the twin suns, and his sharp eyes burned with both anger and curiosity. His voice rolled through the air like thunder. "Human, your words are bold, but they are empty. You think that by taking her punishment you will break the law. You think that by speaking of mercy you will change the hearts of the Zorath. You are wrong. Pain will end your voice, and when your body falls, the people will remember only your weakness." Aaron lifted his head, sweat and dust on his face, his back marked with fire from the lash. Yet his spirit did not bow. His voice rose clear and steady. "You call it weakness to stand for another. I call it strength. She took bread for her brother. She does not deserve death. If the law demands her end, then let it fall on me. I will bear it, and I will not break." The crowd murmured louder now. Some hissed with anger, but others whispered with a new sound in their voices, a sound the Zorath rarely knew. It was doubt. They had always believed in strength through cruelty, but the human's words struck something inside them. The judge's voice sharpened. "Why would you, a human, suffer for one who is not of your kind? She is not your blood. She is not your people. What binds you to her?" Aaron's eyes turned toward Myra, who stood trembling at the edge of the platform. His voice grew softer but carried across the square. "What binds me to her is life. She is alive. She is innocent. That is enough. To stand for another does not require blood. It requires heart." Myra's breath caught in her chest. Her eyes filled with tears again, not from fear this time, but from something deeper. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever stood against the world for her. She pressed her hands to her lips, her body shaking as his words settled in her heart. The judge laughed, though the sound was cold and sharp. "Heart? What power does heart hold against law and lash? What power does compassion hold against the will of rulers? Mercy does not build empires. Mercy does not hold power. It is weakness dressed as kindness." Aaron's voice grew stronger, rising with each word. "Then your empire is built on fear. Your law is built on cruelty. True strength is not in the lash. True strength is in standing when no one else will. True strength is sacrifice. You may call it weakness, but one day even you will see it as greater than your power." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, spreading like a rising tide. The aliens looked at one another with uneasy eyes. Some still scorned his words, but others felt their hearts moved. For the first time, they wondered if their laws were not as unshakable as they believed. The judge stepped closer to the edge of his throne. His long fingers gripped the stone railing. His eyes locked on the human with burning intensity. "Do you believe your suffering will change the world? Do you believe these people will rise because of your pain? You are a fool, human." When the 300 lashes are finished, you will be broken. Your voice will be gone. The woman you protect will see you fall, and she will learn that mercy cannot save her. Aaron's chest rose with heavy breaths. Each lash had burned his body, but his spirit burned brighter. His voice did not falter. If my fall gives her life, then I have already won. If my suffering shows even one heart that mercy is stronger than cruelty, then I have already changed this world. Myra's knees weakened. She pressed her hands to the wooden platform to steady herself. She wanted to cry out for him to stop, but his words froze her voice. She saw not only a man standing against the Zorith, but a fire that could not be quenched. The guards lowered the whip for a moment, waiting for the judge's signal. The crowd grew restless, divided between silence and whispers. The Zorith had never known debate during punishment, yet here in the square, under the light of the twin suns, words clashed like blades. The judge turned his gaze to the crowd. Do not be fooled by the human's tongue. His pain is nothing. His body will break as all bodies break. You will see that mercy is a lie, and law is eternal. But Aaron raised his voice, louder, stronger, carrying across every corner of the square. Look at me. Look at the lashes. I am still standing. I am still speaking. If law is cruelty, then it is weak. If mercy is a lie, then why does it give me strength? You fear mercy because it is stronger than your chains. A hush fell. The words echoed long after they were spoken. The crowd did not cheer, but neither did they laugh. Their silence was deeper than before, a silence of thought, a silence of awakening. The judge's eyes narrowed with anger. He gave a sharp wave of his hand. The guards raised the whip again. Enough of this debate. Let the law continue. We shall see how long your voice lasts, human. Aaron closed his eyes for a breath, gathering strength. When he opened them again, his gaze found Myra. His lips curved into a faint, broken smile. Stand strong. Live free. Her breath caught as the whip struck again. The whip fell again, sharp and merciless. The sound rang across the square, striking not only the human's back but the hearts of all who watched. Aaron's body jolted from the blow, yet his voice did not break. His jaw stayed tight, his shoulders straight, his spirit unshaken. The guards struck again. A new line burned into his back, red and raw, but still he did not cry out. Each lash that landed on him felt like fire crawling across his skin, but he held the pain inside, refusing to let it own him. His silence was louder than any scream. The crowd leaned forward. They had gathered expecting the usual display, where prisoners cried, begged, and fell before the lash. But this human was different. He stood tall, his eyes lifted, his body a shield between the young woman and death. Myra pressed her hands against her chest. Every strike against him felt like a strike against her own heart. She wanted to call out, to beg him to stop, but his earlier words echoed in her mind. Stand strong. Live free. Those words bound her voice, forcing her to stay silent as she watched. The lashes came in rhythm, each one snapping through the air, each one tearing deeper into his flesh. 10 lashes passed. 20. By 30, blood stained his torn shirt, but still he stood. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, yet his eyes burned with a light that refused to fade. The judge leaned forward on his stone throne, his sharp gaze fixed on the human. He expected the man to fall long before this point. Yet here he stood, his silence speaking louder than any law. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. He would not admit it, but unease began to stir in his heart. At 50 lashes, the guards themselves grew weary. Sweat dripped from their brows, their arms heavy from swinging the whip again and again. Still the human did not fall. Still he did not beg. Each time they raised the whip, they wondered if this next strike would break him, but each time he only grew stronger in their eyes. The crowd no longer whispered mockery. Their voices had changed. Some spoke in hushed awe, others in uncertain tones. He still stands. How can this be? He should have fallen by now. Even the children, who had once looked for cruelty, now stared with wide eyes at the man who refused to bow. Myra's tears fell freely. Her hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to rush forward, to shield him from the whip, but she knew the guards would only cast her aside. She could only watch, her heart torn between sorrow and wonder. This human was suffering more than she could ever imagine, and yet he carried it for her. By the time the whip struck for the 100th time, the square had grown strangely quiet. Each crack no longer brought cheers. Each strike now carried weight, as if the people themselves began to feel the sting. The silence of the crowd was deeper than noise, heavy with thoughts they could not voice. Aaron's breath came heavier now. His back was raw and burning, his strength tested beyond measure. His body swayed slightly, but his spirit kept him standing. His mind held to one truth: she would live. That thought gave him fire when his body screamed for rest. The judge finally raised his hand. The guards lowered the whip for a moment, waiting. The judge's voice thundered across the square. "Human, you have taken 100 lashes. You bleed, you shake, yet you still stand. Do you think you can endure 200 more? Do you think your defiance will last to the end?" Aaron lifted his head. His eyes, though tired, burned brighter than before. His voice was hoarse but strong enough for all to hear. "I will endure. I will stand until the last lash falls. Your cruelty will not break me. Your law will not silence me. If 300 is the price, then give them all to me." The crowd gasped. His words carried across every corner of the square, pressing into the hearts of all who listened. The judge's lips tightened into a hard line. He gave a sharp wave of his hand. The punishment continued. The whip cracked again. 110. 120. With each lash, Aaron's body grew weaker, but his spirit seemed to grow stronger. His silence was now joined by words between strikes. His voice rose in the spaces between pain. "You call this strength? I call it fear. You call this justice? I call it chains. You think cruelty makes you rulers, but cruelty only proves your weakness." Each statement spread through the square, planting seeds in the minds of the Zorith. The guards swung harder, their arms shaking, but the words struck deeper than the lashes. Myra's heart pounded. She could hardly breathe as she watched. Her body wanted to collapse from the weight of what she saw, but she stayed upright. The human had given her strength even as he suffered. His words became her shield, his endurance her hope. By the time 150 lashes had struck, the guards themselves faltered. Their arms shook, their hands blistered. Yet the human still stood. His body was marked with deep wounds, but his spirit shone brighter than the suns above. The crowd no longer looked with the eyes of cruelty. They looked with respect. Whispers spread like fire. "He is strong. He is different. Perhaps his words are true." The judge's hand tightened against the stone armrest of his throne. He saw the shift in the people, and it filled him with anger. This was not the lesson he wished to show. The punishment was meant to prove the power of law, but instead it was proving the strength of a human spirit. Myra could not stop her tears. Her voice finally escaped in a soft cry. "Please, stop." But Aaron turned his head slightly, even under the weight of pain, and gave her a faint smile. His lips moved with quiet words meant only for her. "Stand strong. Live free." The whip cracked again, and the punishment continued. The suns lowered slowly in the sky, shadows stretching across the square, but the human still stood, still endured, still turned suffering into a voice louder than law. The lashes had begun, but their weight no longer belonged to him alone. Each strike now struck the hearts of the people who watched, forcing them to question the world they had always known. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the black iron towers of Vera City. The square still held its silence, broken only by the sound of the whip cracking again and again. Each strike landed on Aaron's back with merciless force. His body was torn and weary, yet his spirit burned brighter than before. 150 lashes had already fallen. The crowd, once eager for cruelty, now watched in awe. They had never seen anyone endure so much without falling. They had never seen anyone turn pain into defiance. The guards who swung the whip were trembling. Their arms felt heavy as stone. Sweat rolled down their faces. With each lash they expected the human to collapse, but he did not. He swayed, he bled, he breathed hard, but he remained standing. Myra stood at the edge of the platform, her hands gripping the wooden railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could not tear her eyes away from him. Each strike tore through her heart as much as his body. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not look away. She whispered his words to herself again and again. "Stand strong. Live free." At 170 lashes, the judge rose from his throne. His tall figure loomed over the square, his sharp eyes narrowing. His voice carried like thunder. "Human, your body is breaking. Your blood stains the ground. Still you speak of strength? Still you claim mercy has power?" Aaron lifted his head slowly. His breaths came heavy, but his voice still held steady. "Yes. Because I still stand. Because your cruelty has not broken me. You think strength is in the lash, but it is not. Strength is in sacrifice. Strength is in standing for another." The words rang through the square. The crowd felt them like waves against stone. Some lowered their heads in thought. Others stared with wide eyes, unsure of what they were feeling. Something stirred inside them, something that had never been part of their world before. The judge's lips tightened. He motioned to the guards. "Continue. Give him the full measure. Let him be broken before all." The lashes fell again. 180. 190. Each strike sent fire through Aaron's body, but his will clung to the thought of the young woman standing free. He told himself again and again, "She will live. That is enough." Myra could no longer remain silent. Her voice broke through the still air. "Stop. Please stop. He has done nothing wrong. You cannot take more from him." Her cry echoed across the square. Her words carried desperation and truth. The guards hesitated, but the judge snapped his hand down, commanding them forward. The whip cracked again. 200 lashes had fallen. The crowd gasped. The human's body leaned forward as if about to fall, but then he lifted his head once more. His eyes blazed like fire. His lips parted, and his voice rang out, broken yet stronger than ever. "You will not take my will. You will not silence me. I stand not for myself, but for her. And if I fall as proof that humanity cannot be broken by cruelty." The silence in the square grew heavier. For the first time, even the guards seemed shaken. Their eyes no longer held the cold fire of duty. They looked at the human with something unfamiliar respect. The judge slammed his hand against the stone railing. His voice thundered in anger. You are nothing but flesh. Flesh tears. Flesh falls. The law is eternal. The law will win. Aaron's voice rose, carried by the weight of every lash he had taken. The law may last, but the law is hollow. What lives forever is sacrifice. What endures is hope. That is what you fear. That is what you cannot kill. The crowd stirred. Voices whispered louder now. He is right. How does he still stand? Perhaps mercy is stronger than law. The sound of doubt spread like fire through dry grass. At 250 lashes, the human's knees trembled. His body leaned against the post. His vision blurred. He felt the world tilt around him. His body screamed to fall, to rest, to give in. But deep within him, a voice rose. It was not the voice of law or fear. It was his own voice, steady and unbroken. Stand strong. Live free. Myra cried out again. Please. No more. He cannot take more. Stop this. Her voice was raw with pain, but her eyes burned with fierce light. She was no longer the girl who trembled under the lash. She had taken his words into her heart, and they had changed her. The judge looked down with fury. Silence, woman. The law does not bend to tears. Aaron's voice, though weak, carried across the air. Then let the law break against me. Let every lash fall. I will carry them all. The guard raised the whip again, but his hand shook. His arm felt like lead. He looked at the human, then at the crowd, then at the judge. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether the lash was justice or cruelty. The square was silent, the entire city holding its breath. The human stood at the breaking point. His body was nearly finished, but his spirit had lit a fire in every heart watching. At 270 lashes, the whip struck again. The sound was sharp, but the human still lifted his head. His lips curved into a faint, broken smile. He turned his eyes toward Myra. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but strong enough for her to hear. Stand strong. Live free. She fell to her knees, tears pouring down her face. She pressed her hands together as if in prayer, her voice shaking as she whispered back, I will. I promise. The judge's eyes burned with rage. The human had not broken. The law was crumbling in the eyes of the people. The punishment that was meant to prove Zorith's strength had instead revealed its weakness. By the time the whip reached 280, the guards could barely lift their arms. The human's body swayed, his breath shallow, but still he stood. The crowd no longer whispered. They watched in complete silence, their hearts bound to every strike, their eyes wide with awe. The last lash fell with a sound that echoed across the square like thunder. The guard's arm shook, his breath ragged, his spirit crushed under the weight of what he had done. 299 lashes had struck the human. The ground beneath him was dark with his blood, yet he remained on his feet. His body was bent and broken, but his eyes still shone with fire. The judge rose from his seat, his cloak sweeping around him like a shadow. His voice was sharp, but beneath it there was unease. One more. Give the final lash. End this display. The guard hesitated. His fingers tightened around the whip, but his eyes moved to the human. He saw not weakness but strength greater than anything he had known. His hand refused to rise. The silence of the crowd pressed down on him. Their stares cut through him, and he could no longer obey. Another guard stepped forward, his face pale. He raised the whip, but his eyes faltered when the human turned his head toward him. Aaron's gaze held no hatred, only calm. The guard froze, his arms suspended in the air. His breath quickened as if he were standing before something far greater than law. The judge's voice grew louder. "Finish it! Obey the law! Obey me!" Still the guards stood unmoving. Their hearts beat like drums in their chests. For the first time, they feared not the lash of command but the shame of striking a man who had carried so much and still stood unbroken. The square filled with whispers that grew into a roar. "He has taken enough. He has endured more than anyone. This is no justice." The people who once cheered for punishment now shouted for mercy. Myra stepped forward. Her voice rose clear above the cries. "He has already won. He stood in my place. He carried the pain meant for me. No law can claim victory over that." The crowd cheered at her words. Their voices merged into one, rising like a storm. "Enough! Enough! Enough!" The judge slammed his hand against the railing, his face red with fury. "Silence! The law is not swayed by voices. It is eternal. This human is nothing but flesh." Aaron lifted his head. His body trembled with every breath, yet his voice rang strong. "If I am only flesh, then why do you fear my words? If I am nothing, why do your guards refuse to strike? Why do your people cry out against you?" The judge faltered, his lips tightening. He opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of the crowd drowned him. The square no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the human who had shown them what it meant to stand. The guards dropped their whips. One by one, they stepped back from the platform. Their eyes no longer carried obedience. They turned away from the judge and faced the crowd, as if declaring that their loyalty to cruelty had ended. Myra ran to Aaron's side. She placed her arm under his to keep him steady, though her small frame could hardly support his weight. Tears fell down her cheeks, but her eyes glowed with pride. "You stood for me. You gave everything. I will not let them take more." Aaron's lips curved into a faint smile. His voice was weak but filled with peace. "Then stand for others. That is how we win." The words struck deep into the hearts of all who heard. The crowd fell silent, not out of fear but reverence. They knew they were witnessing the birth of something new, something greater than the law that bound them. The judge shouted again, but his voice cracked. "Take him down. Arrest the woman. Restore order." No one moved. The guards did not step forward. The people did not bow. Instead, a man from the crowd shouted back, "We will not obey." Another followed. "We will not bow." Soon the entire square thundered with the chant. "We will not bow. We will not bow." The judge's face twisted with rage and fear. He realized the power of the law had shattered. The human had endured what no one else could, and in doing so he had shown them that cruelty was not unbreakable. The guards turned away from the judge, leaving him alone on the platform. He looked around, his authority crumbling like sand in the wind. For the first time in his reign, he felt powerless. Aaron closed his eyes, his breath slow but steady. His body swayed, but Myra held him firm. She whispered softly, "Rest now. You gave enough. Your strength has become ours." The people stepped forward, lifting their voices not in anger but in unity. They began to chant the words Aaron had spoken. "Stand strong. Live free." The sound rolled through the city like a wave, spreading from street to street, until even those far from the square heard it and knew that something had changed forever. The dawn rose over Vera City, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The chains of fear were broken, though the path ahead would not be easy. The law of cruelty would fight to return, but now the people carried a light that could not be extinguished. Myra looked at Aaron, her tears falling freely. She whispered so only he could hear. "You gave your pain to save me. But you also gave me your courage. I will carry it now." Aaron opened his eyes once more, his gaze meeting hers. His lips formed the faintest smile. "Then I did not fall in vain." The crowd roared again, their voices rising with the sun. They no longer saw the human as a stranger. They saw him as proof that hope could stand against cruelty. They saw him as a symbol of freedom. The judge fled the platform, his power broken. The guards did not follow him. The people did not fear him. The city had awakened, and nothing could return it to the silence of obedience. As Myra helped Aaron from the platform, the people surrounded them, their hands raised not in violence but in honor. They cleared the way for him, their chants still filling the air. "Stand strong. Live free." The human stumbled, but he did not fall. With Myra by his side and the people behind him, he walked forward into the light of dawn. The lashes had not destroyed him. Instead, they had forged him into a symbol that would live long after the wounds faded. And so the story of the man who took 300 lashes for another was carried through the stars, whispered from one world to the next. It became a tale not of suffering but of strength, not of cruelty but of hope. Humanity had shown once again that its greatest power was not in weapons or wealth, but in the heart that chooses to stand when others cannot.